Man, what's going on, Fantasy World? It's your boy Hot Soup, and I'm coming to you live with our episode of Overachievers for Week 13. Man, we're going to start off talking about the number one quarterback in fantasy football in Week 13, and it happened last night. That's right, man. Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston ends up going off for 508 yards and 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's good for 35.98 points, and they still took the L. Man, look, man, I know a guy who is just a Jameis Winston hater. He hates this guy. But in fantasy football, hey, man, it's facts, not feelings. Even though Jameis throws the game away with his second pick six. Everybody know Jameis known for throwing some pick sixes, man. It is what it is. He's going to throw you in the game or he's going to throw your ass out the game. And yesterday, he threw them out of the game. Hey, man, it is what it is. Jameis Winston had a huge night and still took the L. That's right, man. It is what it is. He did that versus Denver. All right, Denver's defense gets 2 pick sixes in this game, man. It was it was one of the best games I've seen all year. And who would have known or who would have thought? But hey, man, check it out. In week 13, Jameis, your number one scoring fantasy quarterback. You can go get him. He's on most waiver wires right now. Our second quarterback, who had an extremely good game, and they got the W, Russell Wilson. That's right, man. Russell Wilson goes off for 417 yards, 3 TDs, and 1 pick. 27.86 fantasy points, man. Shots out to Rush. Shots out to Mike Tomlin and those Steelers. They over there doing big things, man. They know how to win games. Mike Tomlin is my favorite NFL head coach. Easy, man. They mic'd him up. Oh, my God. Y'all got to hear his mic'd up, man. Off the hook. Hey, Mike Tomlin, shots out to that man for never having a losing season. Still, that's 18 seasons. 18 seasons, and he's never had a losing season. Put him in the Hall of Fame. Our third player that went astronomical this week in week 13 was Bucky Irving. Over in Tampa Bay, that's right here in the Bay. Bucky Irving, 185 yards, a touchdown, good for 26 fantasy points off 28 touches. Bucky Irving, the number one running back in fantasy scoring. Who would have thought, right? Hey, man, get Bucky in them lineups. They giving him the rock. 28 touches? What? Our second running back and number 4th player had a huge game, and I benched him, and I'm kicking myself in the butt because I lost that league, and it might have eliminated me from the playoffs. Depends on what happens in week 14. Your boy Najee Harris. That's right, with those Steelers, 129 yards and a TD, one of his best games this year, 22 touches. He was a workhorse, 21.9 fantasy points, number 3 overall running back. Shots out to Najee. Shots out to them Steelers, man. I see you, B. Henley. Y'all doing big things. Our next player, Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle, man. Oh, I got nightmares about this guy. I was going against him in 3 leagues. The commish of my LTB league popped me with Rico this week. I was sick. I ain't going to lie to you. 123 yards, a TD, 19.8 fantasy points on 25 touches. The number 5 overall running back in week 13. Shouts out to Rico. Dallas, they ain't got nothing else to do. They might as well feature him because CeeDee Lamb and Cooper Rush, womp, 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 womp. Our first receiver off the board, and did he do his thing on Monday Night Football? Had him in a couple of my parlays, but they did not hit because Jerome Ford did not give me an extra 5 yards. I don't even want to talk about it. Soup is sick. My God. Jarrod Jeudy, the number 1 receiver in fantasy scoring, goes off for 235 on Denver. Mr. Patrick Surtain, where were you at? 1 TD, 36 fantasy points off 9 receptions. Jarrod Jeudy had a career day. Jarrod Jeudy has been targeted a gang of times by Jameis Winston this year, and it don't look like that's changing. Jarrod Jeudy went incredible Hulk against his former team. Our next receiver on the board, Keenan Allen, number 2 overall in fantasy scoring with 5 receptions, 73 yards, 2 tutties for 21.8 points. I see you getting it done. That's not going to change. Mike Evans is a strong play for the rest of the fantasy playoffs. Our next receiver off the board was Parker Washington. Parker Washington goes off for 103 yards, a touchdown, a 2-point conversion off 6 receptions, number 4 overall receiver, and that helped absolutely no one because no one had that guy starting. 21.3 fantasy points for Parker Washington. Shouts out to Parker Washington. I ain't starting him next week, and I suggest you don't either. Our first tight end who had damn near another career day, Brock Bowers. Ooh, don't matter who the quarterback is, Brock Bowers is the number 1 tight end in the NFL right now. Went off for 140 yards, 1 touchdown, 25.2 fantasy points on 10 receptions. Number 1 overall in fantasy scoring this week. And right behind him with 10 more receptions was Jonnu Smith. 113 yards, 16.3 fantasy points, the number 2 overall fantasy scorer as a tight end. Jonnu Smith is a top 5 play from here on out. I don't know if y'all been watching him the last 3 to 4 weeks, but he has been going dummy. Yeah. Our first underachiever on the board, and he had the worst game of his career. Brock Purdy in that snow game. Oh my God, it was terrible. Everything that could have went wrong for San Francisco went wrong and more. Brock Purdy, 98 yards. Oh my God. I wore this number 23 Christian McCaffrey jersey, man. R.I.P. Christian McCaffrey. He's worked so hard and diligent to get back on the field, to show us that the Madden curse is not real, to show his fantasy managers he can take them deep into the playoffs. And PCL injury, out for the rest of the fantasy season. Let's get a moment of silence for C-Mac. There will be better days for Christian McCaffrey. He's a hard worker. We know he's going to be back in 2025. But the 2024 season, bow your heads and say a prayer. All right. So Brock Purdy, 98 yards passing, 0 tutties, 0 picks, nothing. 2.16 points, ended up number 31 overall for quarterbacks in week 13. I don't know if it's a shoulder thing going on with Brock, but I am not comfortable playing him going into the fantasy playoffs. You guys might need to hit the waiver wire, find another quarterback that has some good matchups, and stream a playoff quarterback if Brock is what you're leaning on. Hey, man, you heard it from the soup. Our second quarterback that had even a worse day, in my opinion, even though he scored more points than Brock, Kirk Cousins. Ooh, Kirk Cousins, 0 tutties, 248 yards and 4 interceptions. He was turning the ball over, and that's why they got the L. Kirk Cousins, 6.1 fantasy points, number 30 overall in fantasy scoring for quarterbacks. Mm, mm, mm. Kirk Cousins is going to have better days, but he is a matchup start. Our third player and number 1, and this guy stung me. I may have got knocked out of the playoffs in 2 or 3 leagues because of this one start. If only I benched him and put somebody else in. But against Tampa Bay and Chuba Hubbard. Oh, I'm sick. I'm sick with the Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard, 43 yards on 12 touches and a fumble. As soon as he got that fumble, it was a wrap. They had the rookie playing and getting just as many touches this week. 2.3 fantasy points, number 56 overall in fantasy scoring. Oh, I know he's going to have better days. Got to. You can't get no worse than that. Our number 4 player, second running back on the board for biggest flops of the week, Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt goes off for 15 yards off 9 touches, 2.5 fantasy points. Pacheco's world. Kareem Hunt is now a bench. You can keep him just in case something happens to Pacheco, but other than that, he's not getting more than 7 touches a game from here on out. And our next player, last running back off the list, this guy should have been a monster this week. Kenneth Walker, a dud. Got 18 touches, had the volume, 46 yards, no touchdowns, 5.6 fantasy points. And again, we talk about the vulture touchdown by Charbonnet. It has happened time and time again. Our next player, first receiver off the board, big flop in the snow game, Deebo Samuel. 20 yards on 4 receptions. And that's without Christian McCaffrey for a whole half. 2 fantasy points. Number 89 overall in fantasy scoring for receivers this week. Deebo's got to have better days, especially Christian going out. And they just put Jordan Mason on IR. You got to go get Garendo this week. I'm telling you now, Deebo will be a bigger piece of this offense going forward with those big running backs coming out. If you got Deebo, he's a must start from here on out. I know you might not seen the production in the past couple of weeks. I'm telling you now, San Francisco leans on Deebo. You heard it from the soup. Our next receiver off the board. Another guy has starting in like 6-7 leagues, and he flopped for me. Cooper Kupp. Oh, my God. 3 receptions? Cooper Kupp usually gets 3 receptions in the first drive. This guy had 3 receptions for 17 yards, 3.2 fantasy points, number 75 overall in fantasy scoring. Cooper Kupp? Cooper Kupp? What's up? Our next player. And I've been trying to tell y'all, man, it's just not going to be happening for this guy going down the stretch, CeeDee Lamb. They're doubling him. Plus, you got Cooper Rush throwing him the ball. It's not Dak Prescott. CeeDee Lamb is a bench for me from here on out. CeeDee Lamb, 2 receptions, 39 yards, another dismal game, 4.9 fantasy points. He was on my sit list last week, and I hope you sat his ass. Number 66 overall in fantasy scoring, 4 receivers. That is a wide receiver 7. Woo! He's going to have I don't see him having better days. Hey, man, if you got CeeDee Lamb, I'm praying for you. Our first tight end off the board, another snow game. And listen, everything was just not working in the San Francisco game in the snow. George Kittle. George Kittle, 1 reception for 7 yards. That's George Kittle. The number supposed to be the top tight end in the league, top 3 tight end in the league right now. George Kittle. George Kittle. Supposed to be top 3 tight end in the league right now. Goes off for 1 reception, 7 yards, 1.2 fantasy points. The number 47 overall tight end in fantasy scoring. You gotta watch where these games are being played and what the weather's gonna be. I learned a hard lesson this week. And our last tight end, terrible game, Cade Otton. 4 receptions, 20 yards, 4 points. That's not what we're expecting out of that offense. Cade Otton has been a top target. but has flopped as of recent. Number 32 overall tight end this week in fantasy scoring in week 13. Those are our top 10 underachievers. Now you got to check us out for our I Told You So episode. Yeah, I got back hot this week. That's right, Fantasy World. It's your boy Supe. Check us out on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Like and subscribe. It's your boy Hot Soup, and I'm out.